Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Gary Matsuoka, and this is Laguna Hills Nursery, and this morning's class is on growing mulberries and pomegranates. So I guess we'll do this alphabetically. Mulberries. Now, both mulberries and pomegranates have been minor fruits for a long time, and they're becoming more major as the ethnic groups that really where they come from are being more common in this area. So the mulberries in general, now right now they're sleeping, so it's hard to tell anything about them. But they're native throughout the world, to all the continents throughout the world except for Antarctica. And the ones that we normally eat the most are either one of two varieties. This is Morus alba, alba meaning white, so the white mulberries, and Morus nigra, which is the black mulberry. Black mulberry is also known as the Persian mulberry. Morus albas tend to be, well, they call them white mulberries because there's a lot of varieties with cultivars with white berries, although they come in all colors, white, red, tan, black. And then black mulberries actually come in all colors too. So there's a lot of variety in them, but the black mulberries are noted for having, in general, a stronger flavor, and the white mulberries a milder flavor, but again, there's a lot of variation among the trees. The white mulberry was really propagated and grown heavily in the southern United States. Well, it might not have been the white one. I know the mulberries were really heavily introduced in the U.S. in the late 1800s because they were thinking of doing silkworm production. So white mulberry is the larva food of the caterpillars of the silkworm. So they're introducing them to the southern United States for that purpose. I believe what happened is they introduced the wrong species, although the silkworms eat them, they wasn't their favorite. But the white mulberry is what is generally planted at schools to feed their silkworm larvae when they show the kids how insects go through their 4 cycles: egg, larvae, pupa, adult. Since they don't fly, that helps that they don't fly. And the fact that they've been cultivated or cared for by humans so long that they don't seem to mind human intervention or activity around them when they're feeding. So the mulberries, not all, but most of the ones that we're dealing with, especially the white mulberries, there are 2 sexes. So we sell the white mulberries, the female ones, for fruit, and the male ones are the ones that most schools and cities use just for shade and for foliage. And we do have some males out in front in our ornamental section, and the females here are on the side and the back for fruit production. Generally, the male plants, flowers produce a lot of pollen, and they become, quite problematic in some areas of the United States for that reason. The female ones, on the other hand, collect pollen. So you can actually say they're negative pollen producers since their flowers are sticky and the pollen gets stuck to them. So they're taking pollen out of the air. So the female plants either don't make any pollen at all. I mean, there's always on trees some branches that don't cooperate. They might have some male branches among the females, but generally the females just make the fruit. And you don't have to buy the males. The pollen is carried through the air. It's not bee pollinated, it's wind pollinated. And there's so many male mulberry trees in the area, we don't have to sell males for you. You don't need it. So, okay, so the white mulberries, the nice thing about them too is you can propagate them from cuttings. You take a piece of branch, stick it in the ground, it grows. Now they have to get a certain size to make their fruit. This may not be quite thick enough yet to have fruit this year. It's close. It may make 1 or 2, but next year it should, if you put this in the ground especially, and get a trunk with over an inch caliper on it, then it should start production. This was grown from tissue culture. The plants we got were literally about that big a year and a half ago. So they grow fast. White mulberries are very, very vigorous plants. They generally want to be, their goal in life is probably to become 40 to 50 foot tall and wide, and they can do it in as few as 5 years. So you do have to prune these a lot to keep them down to picking height. Now pruning doesn't make them, have them make more fruit. The reason why we prune these trees is to keep the fruit production at a height we can pick. Otherwise, if you let them get big, they fruit better. But you know, when it's 20 foot up in the air, there's no way that anyone, but the birds, you know, they'll have all. Now the Persian mulberries, now our main supplier for mulberries went out of business a few years ago, or quit doing bare root a few years ago. And this is the last Persian I have at the moment. Now my current supplier is growing Persian, but they haven't had enough to supply us yet. So this is the last one from our old supplier. And what's happening here is the Persian mulberries are much slower growing. They only usually get about 20 to 30 foot, and this one is a compact variety that only grows to about 15. Now to get this, now normally if this was grown on its own roots, it would be about this tall right now. What they did to get this off the ground sooner is they put, this is a white mulberry trunk down here. So they grew a white mulberry trunk and grafted it right here to get some height on it. Now when you put this in the ground, it's going to drop 18 inches since the pot. So it's grafted right about 4 feet, and most of your fruit will be within picking height. And these grow slowly, and you can easily keep them as down to picking height. And the berries on the black mulberries tend to be stronger flavored. This particular one about 1.5 inches, so good sized berry by maybe 1 inch wide. And they do taste a lot like blackberries. And the big, of course, problem with mulberries a lot is that the skin is real delicate, and as you're picking, your fingers and hands are turning black. And the one problem we have in gardens or in patios is if the birds are sitting there eating the berries, all your walls start turning black, your furniture starts turning black, so you have that problem for part of the year. The white mulberries tend to be a lot less staining, especially if you don't get the black white mulberries. The white mulberries and the red ones don't seem to stain. One good thing about mulberries is that they're very tolerant of poor soil conditions, and they've got real powerful roots. In the ground, they don't need much help. You put them in the ground, the roots grow very quickly. They'll find their water. They may stunt all the plants around them doing that, where they just suck all the water and the nourishments out of the ground. So they do have what are called invasive roots. They're not really known for lifting sidewalks up. They just invade planters and take over the ground. They are closely related to figs. Figs are essentially a mulberry with skin on the outside of the fruit. But so you have to watch where you plant them, or keep them in a pot and just prune to keep them from getting too large for the pot. Now we do have an interesting white mulberry. This is called Tea's Weeping. So if it was left on its own, it would be ground cover. It wouldn't grow up. What the grower has to do is stake up the trunk to get some height on it, and then the branches just head down from that point. So very good ornamental edible. Because it was trained to about 7 foot, it might grow maybe 10. The new growth off the top kind of arches out and then down, arches out and down. And you end up with a little dome in your garden, maybe 10 by 10. In the summertime, the kids can stand up inside of it and pick mulberries, kind of hide in there. So it's a real favorite of children's gardens. We have the male versions in our front. So if you don't want the berry problem, you can buy the males and just use them as a real novelty. I mean, the branch structure just coming straight down like this is very, very novel looking in the garden. Driving through Hemet, I saw a house once with one of these in the front yard. I'm not sure if it was a fruiting type or a non-fruiting type, but apparently these folks didn't believe in pruning. So you looked at this tree, and normally we keep it like that, but they hadn't pruned it for about 3 or 4 years, and the tree was about 30 foot across, looking like that. It just cascaded across the yard. So pretty impressive looking.
What is that variety?
This is T-E-A-S, Teas Weeping. And it's a fruiting type. And the non-fruiting male is called chaparral. We have those in the front. They're a bit older, so they have thicker trunks on them. So what this does is the leaf's out. Now the white mulberries tend to leaf out early. Some years we see them leaf out in December, if it gets a warm spell in December. They don't seem to need much cold at all in the winter to do their thing, so we don't think they need any chill. They don't have a requirement for chill, in other words. And they start growing early, and the first crop of berries is usually ripe by May. We've had as early as April. If they bloom in December, they'll ripen about April. Normally it's about May or June for the regular white mulberry. The teas is usually a few weeks later, and the black mulberries tend to wake up late. They seem to need real hot conditions to wake up. So their normal time for waking up is April, May, June, somewhere in that region. When the soil gets warm, they come alive, and their fruit's not ripe until July, even August. Now, one of our customers about 20 years ago introduced us into double cropping on mulberry. So we didn't know they can do this until someone had a Teas Weeping mulberry plant in their yard. They said, berries are small. I don't really like this one. So they pulled it out of the ground, brought it back to us. We put it back in a pot. Because they had pulled it out of the ground in July, it went into shock. The leaves fell off. And then about a month later, it woke back up and flowered and made another crop. We're going, okay, this is interesting. So on our other mulberry, we just stripped the leaves off of one branch in midsummer, and 2 weeks later it bloomed and made another crop. So the following year we tried it on various branches. Now when you strip leaves off, you just take one leaf off, nothing happens. You've got to take all the leaves off on a single branch. The leaves put out hormones that prevent new buds from growing. So if the leaves are there all year, you don't get any flowers opening up or any new growth. The leaves are inhibiting that, but you strip all the leaves off. It's what the cold weather does in winter. All the leaves die and fall off. And then when the weather warms up, no leaves, the buds are free to bloom and make another crop. And then the leaves come out at the same time. So during warm weather, if you want to strip a branch off, I don't recommend young trees at all. These trees are too young to get a second crop going. But as they get older and thicker, we've gotten one branch to do 3 crops in a year. And with some of the warmer winters, you can probably get a 4th one in there. So you can certainly get the multiple crops on these. We've done the same with the black Persian mulberries, although their season's shorter, so maybe only 2 crops. Now this one happens to be a white mulberry called the Pakistan mulberry. And the Pakistan mulberry is noted in that the berries on it can be up to 5 inches in length. So they're slender dark red, dark red. They come in white too, but I believe this is a red one. And they can get very long, and they're very mild and sweet. So a lot of people, it's their favorite mulberry. Some people prefer the tartar flavor, more acidic flavor of the Persian. The nice thing about Pakistan mulberries, they don't stain. They don't have the darkness to do staining damage. And it does look like red caterpillars hanging out of your tree. So Pakistan is a full-size mulberry. This year we're just carrying the Pakistan and the weeping one. This one's already sold to someone else, but that's all we can get this year now. I have bare root Pakistans, which are marginally thicker than this. I don't know if they're worth buying that one or getting these. The bare root Pakistans probably have bigger roots because this pot is kind of restricting the root growth, whereas the bare root ones, they're generally bigger roots. So they might have enough strength to make fruit this year. Now with mulberries, whatever grows off of last year's wood. So on this particular plant, this point up, and it was like 10 foot tall. Anything growing off of these buds on this stem can make branches with fruit on them. Anything growing off of these, well, these are too skinny, they probably won't make any fruit. So you kind of trim them a lot. You can trim them several times a year, but in the winter time, if they grow a branch like this, you can cut it down to the last few nodes on this branch, last few buds, and any branch growing off of those will make fruit on them, similar to what figs do, and a lot of fruit trees do the same thing. Cherimoys do that too. If you cut it down to the older wood down here, you'll get plenty of branches, no fruit for 1 year. So they call this pollarding, where they take it down to the last bit of last year's growth, maybe 2 or 3 nodes, and then they grow branches that come out and make fruit on them. And then the next winter, if you want to keep it short again, you have to leave a little bit. So just 2 or 3, it's just about 3 or 4 inches of growth, and then they'll grow back. They may grow 10, 15 foot. They don't mulberry all the way to the top. I've seen a lot though. But you'll get several feet of mulberries, at least a fruit production on each branch. So they certainly do. 1 year at my house, we did not prune our mulberry tree back. It was like 25 foot tall, and there was a lot of mulberries on there. But you generally get plenty, even if you prune it down to stubs. So on an old mulberry tree, you may see in the ground a large stump with all these short branches from the year's growth being pruned to that stump. Now, you see a lot of on street trees, the ornamental mulberries, they let the trunk grow and stub it usually at about 7 or 8 foot. So you get a canopy on them. Every year they grow 15, 20 foot out, and you get this 30, 35 foot mulberry tree, and every winter they cut it back down to that form so that it doesn't get to 50 by 50, which it really is trying to do. Now, mulberries do have trouble with wound infections, so if you want to play it safe, clean your pruners off with bleach, or some people use hydrogen peroxide, but bleach before you start pruning your tree to make sure it doesn't get any infections in the wood. They're real subject to what's called slime flux, and slime flux is an infection in the sapwood, and it's inside the tree. You can't do anything to cure it. You'll see this ooze coming out of a part of the bark, and it just drips, and it smells like it's fermenting inside. The tree is building up a lot of pressure to try to force the infection out. Arborists used to drill holes and let it drain better, but they found out by studies that it didn't help the tree was helping itself cure it. If you poke holes in it, it might introduce more infections. Usually the infections aren't curable, but the tree can live with it for a long time or it might kill it. So they're relatively short-lived trees compared to a lot of other trees, but generally, you know, they're real fast to get to mature size. Yes?
If you're leaving 1-year-old growth every year, does that mean that over time it sort of gets bigger?
True. Of course, what you can do is say, okay, so I got these branches here getting a little bit longer, and I have these branches here getting a little longer. You can always cut it down to the lower ones on your tree. But just know on any tree, the smaller the diameter of the wood you're cutting through, the less damage you're doing to the tree. So it's always nice to stay on top, but don't let it get this big and then cut it down to a big giant stump, because there's a lot more damage and more likely to get infections than if you cut, you know, 1-year-old wood. Actually, on mulberries, it's so fast, 1-year-old wood can be 1.5 inches in diameter. It can really get big quickly, but that's better than cutting through a foot-wide trunk. Okay, so, mulberries, not many pests, just the birds getting your fruit. Keep the ants off. If the ants bring scale insects up there, so ant control is good. But not much else on mulberries. Any questions? So we just have the tea's weeping. I only have 3 of these left, and then the Pakistan mulberries, we've got a number of bare roots and several in containers. We might have one in a 15-gallon container too that may produce fruit this year. Now you can grow mulberries in pots, but they've got to be fairly large. I mean, this is a 20-gallon bucket, but really it's a bit small for a mulberry. We've grown them in pots about this big and gotten quite a bit of fruit off of them. This is a 45-gallon container. So if you want to control the roots on your tree, this is one way to do it. They're pretty tolerant of being in containers. Some plants don't like the heat. The soil in a pot is usually the same temperature as the air temperature, so at night, you know, in the ground, usually the temperature stays above 50 degrees in the winter and below 90 degrees in the summer. In a pot, it can be well over 100 degrees in the summer and as cold as, you know, low 40s in the winter. But mulberries seem to be able to tolerate that quite well. So, and the soil we'd recommend in containers is our top pot, which we don't think any other nursery makes a permanent potting soil. This is 2/3 inert material. We'll talk about this more in our class next week. But the soil that you see in our containers looks like mostly rocks in here because that's what is permanent. If you make potting soil out of wood, then it just shrinks away and it gets real soggy and the plants start collapsing in the soil. But our top pot is mostly what soil is made out of, which is quartz. And the plants generally, with this exception, stay fairly upright in them. Okay, so that's mulberry trees. Now, pomegranates are thought to have originated in India. I mean, the center for breeding work and collecting and all that tends to be Turkey, but they thought to have originated in India, northern and southern India. And in northern India, the pomegranates tend to be evergreen, deciduous. They tend to drop their leaves in the winter. And in southern India, they tend to be evergreen. So there's different types you can get. This year, most of them went deciduous. We got a little cooler than the last few years early, and they tended to drop their leaves. but generally, well, pomegranates do not need winter. If we don't have a winter, they just stay awake, and they seem to do better, or do even better on those warmer winter years. So they don't require winter; they'll tolerate winter. What farmers around the country have figured out is that the hard-seeded varieties, like the standard store one Wonderful, can take colder weather better than the soft-seeded ones. So there are ones that, for eating purposes, ones with soft seeds and one with harder seeds. And the harder seed ones seem to be better for both juicing and for handling colder winter conditions. So there's a reason to have either one in the U.S., although, again, for fresh eating, we prefer the soft-seeded ones. So for 100 years, the variety called Wonderful, which is the standard commercial one. So Wonderful is a large fruit similar to this fruit here, but it's bright red on the outside and dark red on the inside. It's got the harder seeds. It originated in Florida over 100 years ago, and for 70, 80 years it was our major pomegranate that we grew. It's the one we knew it has that nice acidic flavor, good sweetness, good quality fruit. In the mid 80s, early 80s, now there's a gentleman, his name was Dr. Gregory Levine in Russia, and he had been collecting pomegranates. He was in the very southern end of Russia, down near the Black Sea or Caspian Sea, or between the two, where the climate is somewhat like Oregon, coastal Oregon, or Northern California. And he had been collecting pomegranates throughout the region, from Turkey, from India, throughout the region. And he had a collection, and he was losing his collection in the early 80s when Russia was breaking up into pieces. So he called up all the universities around the world and said, I'm sending you cuttings, please take these cuttings and keep this collection alive. And the collection in the United States was sent to UC Davis. And in the late 80s, they had their first taste test comparing the Russian collection with the ones that had been created in the United States. Now, in the United States at that time, people were introducing soft-seeded varieties like Utah Sweet, Eversweet. Those were the top-rated ones that we had at that time. So the problems we had was that the soft-seeded ones were also generally light-colored, flesh, and somewhat bland flavored. And the seeds, even though they're soft, were still fairly large. When the Russian ones came out with that first taste test, they took the top 7 spots. So at that point, I said, okay, different set of pomegranates to sell. So from that point on, now the problem we had was that when the collections were released by commercial growers, they changed the Russian names to English names, and no one knew what was going on. We didn't know what was, and they admit too that they had assigned different pomegranates to the same name. So it was all messed up for about 10 years, and then they finally gave back the Russian names, and then everything settled down. We know what we're getting now. So the top-rated pomegranate in the world is this one, Parfyanka. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right, but it's a large fruit, red skin, red flesh, real small, soft seeds, so you hardly even notice that you're eating seeds. And they're trying to describe the flavor. It's hard because it's still a pomegranate, but they say it's like red wine. So a nice, I would say a mellow flavor, not very high on the acidity, but it is considered the top flavored one. And then Ariana, which is another one, a little bit darker red overall, a little bit just slightly more tart. Still not anywhere close to wonderful, but just a hint of tartness in this one. Sometimes Ariano wins, sometimes Parfalco wins the taste test. And then the third one on the list, I mean, they had a taste test just a few years ago in Florida with the Florida varieties, and they brought some over from, I guess, UC Davis. And again, these took the top 3 spots from UC Davis. I forgot how to spell this one. 1 second. Dziarski Rosovii. And this one was described as being equivalent to the best lemonade you've ever eaten. Now this one, you know, it was 3 years ago. Customer said, "What does that mean?" It's a pomegranate. So there was some fruit on one of our trees, so we picked it off. And eating it, again, the seeds are tiny and soft. It was sweet until you swallowed it, and it does the same thing that lemonade does. It has that finishing astringency in your throat, and we're going, boy, this is really good. So he bought the tree, and unfortunately our supplier stopped propagating Dziarski, I guess because the name is so difficult to spell that no one was buying it. So we're having to propagate off our own trees now to keep this one going. But that one is one of our favorites too, certainly good also. So those are your top 3. Desertney, which we have out there too, Desertney, of course that means dessert in Russian. That one is very sweet and mellow. In the book they said it's equivalent to orange juice, but I would just say it's a sweet, mellow flavor. I think those are all the ones we have right now. I have a few around here somewhere, maybe I don't, might be our growing ground. Serenevi, but I don't think I have I think that's no. Well, one of these ways. Anyway, that one's another one they say is like, I can't remember what they said, like a great watermelon flavored one, but I haven't eaten this one yet. And and Dave Wilson quit propagating this one too, so we're having to scrounge around for cuttings to grow new plants. We do have Pink Satin out there. Pink Satin is the U.S. variety, one of the top rated ones, and they say it's like the best fruit punch, and it's also got small soft seeds. So, and then we have, this is the Austin. So I had another grower who was growing Austin. Austin is originally from Syria. Now I have another one called Syria, so it's going to get confusing, but Austin was from Syria. It's a hard-seeded variety. It's supposed to be the best one for juicing, better than wonderful. So there was a whole book written about Austin pomegranates by a Texas farmer who said this is the best pomegranate he's ever grown. I haven't eaten this one yet. So, but we are propagating the Austin pomegranate too, because our supplier went out of business. So that's the Austin, which is a hard seed. I mean, in Texas, you know, even though the latitude is lower than California, it gets much, much colder there. I mean, they drop down to 0 in Austin apparently, so they can't grow the soft-seeded ones there. And we have, I think we have another one running around that one of our customers gave us, said this one's really, that was one called Syria. But I don't know if Syria is this soft seed or hard seed. I'll have to get in touch with them and ask them that again. So we're propagating that one also. There's a few we'd like to get. that we don't have. I think there was one called cranberry. I don't know, there's a few other ones that are highly rated out there that we haven't come across yet. But again, Parfionca ariana and Jasarski are in the top. As far as fresh eating, and Austin may be the top as far as juicing. We have one other pomegranate that we grow, and it's Aaron. And this is different. This is an Aaron pomegranate here. It's the only one I have on the property for sale at the moment. But one of my neighbors, who I believe is in marketing or importing or something, he was in Singapore eating a pomegranate and loved it and brought some of the seeds back, which were soft, planted in his garden, grew it, got a tree that grew about 10 by 10, flowered and fruited year round. Never stops blooming. It blooms year round, fruits year round. This is one of the fruits we just picked off of one of our trees. Soft seeded, light red, sweet. I wouldn't say it's as good as these, but very good ornamental tree. It flowers year round, fruits year round. So it's got a lot going for it. Difficult to propagate. So generally with the hard-seeded or the deciduous pomegranates, all you do is take a stem, twig about that thick, that long, stick in the ground, darn thing grows. The evergreen ones, difficult. So we've had more, like the first year we tried propping it, because my neighbor never could make new plants out of his plants. You can grow the seeds, but from the stems to get a, clone of it, he couldn't do it. So he had me try it. The first year we got 2. This is one of the 2. Second year we got about 18. Third year we got about 20. Well, this year finally we've got close to 100 plants growing. So we'll have them available for sale in 1 gallons. They'll be maybe this big by late spring. So we'll finally have some of these available for sale. The neat thing about pomegranates is they're built on new growth. And the Aarons, usually anytime we grow them from a cutting, they fruit within a year. They start growing. So most pomegranates, they bloom mainly in the spring, into early summer, but most of the fruit production in the spring. The problem we're having the last couple years is that, older plants fruit no matter what. The younger plants, they don't have enough strength in these stems. They depend on the sunlight and the heat. So if our spring is hot and sunny, this will produce fruit this year. If it's cloudy, nothing. Until it's got, nice thick stems on it. Like I remember in the ground at my house, we had some 5th year, they all made fruit. They had to get stems that were, thicker than 1 inch in diameter before they were fruiting. But when we had a real hot spring, the last hot spring we had, 2014, it was 90 degrees every day that spring, and we had pomegranates this size in little tiny pots, all with fruit on them. The next year, really cloudy spring, only 2 of our plants had fruit. But the year before, it was like 80 of our plants, almost every single one of them was fruiting in the first year plants. Or actually, these are 2 years old. This is essentially a first year plant, second year plant. This is a 3rd year plant. And this is 4th year, 4th or 5th year actually. Now on pomegranates, so the goal is when you're growing these, and one thing about pomegranates, they're quite tolerant of any soil. So just like mulberries, you can put them in the wrong potting soil and they'll make it. If you put them in the right potting soil, they look a lot better and grow faster, which is our top pot. They're drought-tolerant plants, but if you let them get dry, you run the risk of cracking the fruit open prematurely. So it's always better to keep them on the wet side. In our own garden, my last house, we put them in this one spot. We didn't know that when we had an El Nino year, it would become a lake. So we thought, oh, that's the end of our pomegranates. They're supposed to be drought-tolerant plants. So they're sitting in about that much water for 3 months. We had our best crop ever. So that didn't seem to hurt them at all, the fact that they were sitting in water, underwater, in heavy clay soil. So they're pretty tolerant to that too. It's just that if you want size on the fruit, more water. But if they dry up on you, the plant actually takes water. All plants can take water out of their fruit. The fruit shrinks a bit, and then you water it. They just blow open as they suck the water back in the fruit very quickly. They just burst open. Or if they're dry and it rains on them, that's it. They all crack open. So you want to keep them wet, or make sure they never get watered if you let them get dry, because then they absorb water too fast. So the other thing you have to do, like this plant here, has got too many skinny trunks. So you want to clear it out. You want to keep the thicker ones as they grow. And they can, none of these are grafted. So anything that comes out of the ground is the same plant. So you leave them in the ground for a year or two, let them just grow, see what happens. Now these were not the original branches. The branches in the middle here were the original ones, but you can see that the newer branches are much thicker. So we'll keep the newer branches and cut out a lot of these skinny ones, because the skinny ones never seem to have enough strength to grow good fruit. The thicker branches make good fruit. Most orchards will tell you between 1 and 8 trunks they work with. So you can work with 1 trunk, you can work with up to 8, but we don't like to go too much, because again, it sacrifices the size and thickness of the stems if you have too many. And pomegranates, olives do the same thing when they're young. They put out hundreds of these little branches out of the ground, and you just have to keep mowing them down. Just develop the thicker ones. After about 10 years, they stop doing that. They just stay with the thicker stuff and fruit well off of that. Now, you don't have to do much pruning when they're young. Again, just thin out the thin branches. As they get older, and you want to keep them down to, say, most orchards will cut them down 6 to 8 foot in the wintertime and thin them out. If they get too dense, they've got to grow bigger to make fruiting wood. To develop good, strong branches, you have to let them get sunlight. If you keep pruning them to, say, a 6-foot bowl every winter, it just gets denser and denser and denser, and there's no room in there anymore to develop leaves or fruit. So you've got to get in there and just thin out the branching, so open it up.
Keep the soil wet in the ground. Does that mean a couple times a week or every other day?
Well, most in agriculture, what they found out is that constant watering is more efficient than periodic watering. So Israel figured it out generations ago. If you just drip, drip, drip all day long, you use less water than if you flood it once a week. And they also found out, University of California, Davis did a study in an orchard where you watered every day lightly versus once a week. They thought that once a week, deep watering would develop a much larger root system. Exactly the opposite happened. They had a better, more substantial root system on the light daily irrigation. So now everybody's changed their irrigation pattern because it's better for the plant. It's better for production to keep the soil moisture as even as you can, prevents the cracking, larger fruit, because if they drop between waterings, the fruit stays small. So there's nothing wrong with watering constantly, lightly, and use less water. So everything about watering that the water district tells you is incorrect if you're growing a production plant. Now, if you're just growing an ornamental plant, like there are ornamental pomegranates, you can hardly water them at all, they're fine. But because they are drought tolerant, but if you want the best quality fruit, it is better to water them lightly, constantly.
Does that apply to other stone fruit?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The whole
Yeah, pretty much.
whole concept of fruiting.
Yeah, all farms water pretty much daily, if not more.
Citrus too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if you drive through the Central Valley, through some of those orchards, you always see a wet streak around each tree.
So this deep root watering system kind of thing, probably not the way to go on some
Right.
This is what I did.
This is the opposite of what we thought.
Yeah, there are no deep roots on plants, so plant roots go down a foot, foot and a half. That's it. So the reason for it, well, we'll go into that next week, but roots have to breathe air, and if below a foot and a half, they can't breathe. So they're up near the surface. Fertilizer-wise, nothing special. As they get older, we kind of feed them less and less. A lot of times just their dead leaves are good enough. Mulberries, like if you put them in the ground, don't feed them. They seem to be able to find everything on their own. Now, when you do feed them when they're real young, we like to go with the formula similar to this. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, mostly nitrogen, next most potassium. In the ground, definitely, where our soil in Orange County has plenty of phosphorus, we don't need to add the middle number at all, so you can pick a product with very little middle number on there. When the tree's older and it's too big, you can switch to a fertilizer that doesn't have as much of that in there. This one's 552. This will make them grow well enough, though. Now, when we grow plants in containers, because our soil doesn't have, the ecology isn't working yet and we want them to grow fast, we usually start them off with our Osmocote, which is 15, 9, 12. Still the first number is the highest, to get them going quicker. In the ground, you can stick with organics. There are plenty of organisms in the ground that eat that up, spit it out as fertilizer, and the plant gets it fairly quickly. But in our potting soil, because it's not, there's nothing alive in it at the moment, then the chemical fertilizers like this, which this one is a time release, lasts 6 months, the Osmocote, will give you a quicker result. You can always put this on at the same time. This will kick in about a month or so. Takes organics a little while longer to get started. But once they start, in the long run, organics generally are considered better. And dead leaves may be the best form of organic fertilizer you can apply. That's how nature operates on dead leaves. Okay, any questions about the pomegranates?
Can you show what you would prune on this if this was in my yard? Should I prune it? What would I do?
Well, it's not dense enough yet to really have to worry about it because it's so narrow, the sunlight gets in there.
Okay.
It's just when plants are, say, 5 foot wide or wider, then the sunlight can't get to the middle anymore. It's just not that, but if this was a bigger tree, you know, definitely cut out some of these skinnier things that are just running around in here. And, you know, just to simplify it on top of that, so.
Things in the middle, kind of like the other concept on the other.
Right, and.
Fruit, you want to eliminate the stuff in the middle.
Yeah, and in fact, to train this a little better, if it does do it on its own, it's nice to keep these branches separated a bit so the light can get in the middle. But on older fruit trees, they'll tell you, oh, they want like a foot gap between branches so that the light can get in there and they can regrow.
Just thought I'd get ahead of it
Mhm.
before it gets too bad. I can't go back. I took a picture of mine, so when you're done, I'll have you give me some advice.
Do you have leaves on your plant?
No.
It's not budding.
When does the fruit ripen? How do you know when it's time to pick?
We never know. I mean, the literature will tell you about when they're ripe. So some ripen in, like when I used to grow the Eversweets, they would ripen in August. I go, well, this is really early, but they're good already. A lot of the Russian ones ripen in September, October. Wonderful is late. It ripens in October, November.
Perfect for holiday decorating.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
I just want a big bowl.
And then the Aran ripens year round. So we, you know, the fruit is different colors on the tree. Sometimes it comes out real pale, sometimes dark red. We don't know what causes that so far. I mean, just all different colors. So we just, picked for size.
When I was a young kid, centuries ago, I lived in Northern California, and a lady in one of the surrounding neighborhoods always gave away pomegranates for Halloween.
Oh,
We used to flock to her house. So I just assumed Halloween
when
was
they're
down
right
there, you know,
Mhm.
just, but, some are big, some are small. You don't know what the hell's going on.
Okay. I was going to mention pomegranates self-fertile partially. So all orchards would plant more than one variety. So if you have two varieties, you'll get more fruit, larger fruit, than if you just have one variety. But most people just plant one and they get good enough fruit. But they said, I think it's about a 10-12% increase on production when you have two varieties to cross-pollinate. So you can think about that. Now, when they do the taste test, we notice that the guys who open these up, and they have to do hundreds of them at the taste test, they always have big bowls of water. So they open them up underwater so they don't get splattered. That's one method. Now, a guy from Persia, I think he was Syrian actually, he said that once you're real good at this, you can tell exactly where the membranes line up, right at the apexes of the fruit.
Right.
And he took his,
They don't grow like that inside.
yeah. Well, he just used the knife. He showed me. He just took his knife and cut right along certain lines, and opened it up, and no squirting.
Wow.
They know how to do it. So they can see through the skin and get that knife right in the right lines.
Full body suits.
Or just, well,
I know.
I was gonna go buy the juice at the farmer's market. I've been doing that.
Gary, when I open them up, it's wonderful, and I cut off, circular thing on top and bottom, find where those segments are, pull it apart, and then I, with the skin facing up, over a bowl, I take a wooden spoon and smack it, and you get about 80% of the seeds out
That's brilliant.
pretty quickly. And there will be some spatterings in the bowl, I keep it down inside the bowl, but I don't use any water on it, so it works pretty well.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I bought a Paprianca here 3 years ago, and the second year I got one fruit, and the squirrel ate it.
Well, it was good.
Last year I got 6, and the squirrel got 5.
Oh,
Do you have any tips on
Anti-squirrel.
protection?
Well, my neighbor who had this one in his yard, they were wrapping all their fruit with foil to keep the birds and the rats from eating them. So we just wrapped them up. You can try Ziploc bags. Ziploc bags seem to work pretty good too.
Chew right through that?
They may not.
Squirrel catchers.
Yeah.
Those have a heart.
Oh, we're
Yeah.
living in the yard.
I have the dog all ran out, somebody.
Dog helps, right there you go.
Everything out of the yard. I have a tip for all fruit
He only
trees,
works on
and it's
fluffy-tailed squirrels.
the silver or chrome looking plasticware, silverware spoons. My brother-in-law gave me a whole box. Drill a hole in the handle of the spoon, and then with a big paper clip, hang it in the trees. It really, I think, worked well. I had lots and lots of fruit this year.
So she said the
Lots of
chrome
nectar.
colored silver plastic silverware.
Silverware. You can go to Smart and Final and buy just spoons.
Okay.
And I have about 8 fruit trees on St. Mary, and I hung them. After I saw where the fruit was actually going to be, I
Okay.
hung them pretty close. I kind of adjusted,
Uh-huh.
but I did put them in there, and I think it helped a lot.
But they were plastic?
The plasticware, like
Yeah.
silverware,
Yeah.
or plasticware,
Yeah.
but they're chrome looking
Yeah, I've
and
seen
shiny
those.
and
Yeah.
and so
I'll be darned.
So shiny stuff is supposed to keep the birds away.
yeah. But then at the bottom, I know I have raccoons in the area, and the first year I had 30 apricot that I was watching to turn the right color, And as soon as they did, all 30 were gone.
Yeah.
And I went, well, and they were pretty low, and so I decided that if there was any fruit low, I was gonna hang the fruit low, of the spoons low. So that, I think it helped. I did find a few bird things, you know, that were pecked at, and so I just left them out there. Yeah, yeah, and so I just left those for them to come back to.
Right.
Also, I took pictures of my nectarines, that was the nectar-plum I had gotten here. Most beautiful red tree when it's leafing out, and the fruit looks like dark red plums. But I had bees getting in there, they were just solid swarming in these nectarines that had gotten opened up, and I thought, there's gonna be some great honey out there, cause the bees come to my trees to collect their nectar. And I didn't realize, I took lots of pictures and put it on Facebook, cause I didn't realize bees would do that, but to the flowers, but to the fruit, that was strange to me. That was new.
You contributed.
I
to my
did, I'm so
picture.
glad, cause I buy local honey.
Okay, well, class is over, thank you, and then we'll have
Yeah,
I'll-
thank you.
more questions if you have 'em.